Hello, everybody. Firstly, if you'd like to add captions to the session, you'll actually find a CC button at the start of the webinar, sorry, at the bottom of the webinar. So it's for you to kind of enable captions. Secondly, some housekeeping rules. This session is being recorded and will be available for all of you in the next few days. And lastly, we do have time for some questions. So please feel free to drop in questions in the Q&A bar, and we will pick them at the end of the presentation. Yeah, I think that starts off with, I think I want to start off with a question. We're not running a poll for this, but something for you to think about and probably answer in the chat to hosts and panelists. Are you a AMP for email knowers, or are you an AMP for email master, right? And with that thought, I'll let the answers come in to the hosts and panelists. But with that thought, I'll hand it over to the lovely speakers today, James and Jay. James, over to you for a quick introduction, and then followed by Jay, and then we'll kick off.
Yeah, sure thing. We'll flip the slide around. So, hi everyone, I'm James Deacon. I'm a deliverability consultant here at Netcore. I've been in email for probably about 10 years. Feels like I should get some kind of benchmark for that, but yeah, well, award I'm not sure. But I'm fortunate enough to have worked with some, quite heavy at ESP level, but also at agency and with some all different array of B2C and B2B clients, but mainly within strategy and deliverability. And now I work alongside Netcore clients to make sure with their CSM that not only do their email strategy drive emails that convert, but we actually get them into the inbox with a long-term strategy. So that's me. Over to you, Jay.
Cool. Yeah. So hi, I'm Jay. So I'm a head of dev at the agency Action Rocket. We cover everything from CRM, and I'm quite lucky. I basically get to be an email nerd all day, every day. So I get to play with the code, figure out problems, sort out solutions and stuff like that. I've been in email for almost 10 years as well. But before that, I was digital marketing for multinational companies and things like that. And my AMP history is actually, we sent the first AMP email from Braze in January 2019 with Babylon Health, which is actually where Jim, who's in the chat I saw, worked as well. So yeah, I've been sending AMP since the very beginning, since Mark Robbins introduced it to us at the end of 2018. So I'll hand back to James just to carry on to the next slide.
Yeah, that's a cool fun fact. One of the founding senders. I love it. So yeah, to take everyone through the agenda. Again, thank you all for taking the time midweek, particularly in the season of Black Friday that is often thrust upon us all to know how busy things can be. So we're hoping we can share some good value and some good tips here. Agenda-wise, we wanted to make it a little bit fun. So from an AMP for email perspective, run through some of the common myths that have been there over the years and either bust them or confirm if they might be true. Would love any participation along the way. If perhaps you want to vote as we go through them if you think they're good or not, in terms of busters or not. And then a couple of things that hopefully are takeaways that help drive a bit of value as well. So high level, how easy it can be to create an AMP email, and some common traps and issues or pitfalls that we see clients often fall in that we can hopefully help you avoid, along with a couple of easy wins that might help supercharge some of your next campaigns. And as Anoop alluded to, we want to reserve some time at the end for some Q&A. So as the questions hit your mind, please pop them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen on your Zoom, and then we can look to address as many of those as possible towards the end. So with that, I think over to you, Jay.
Thanks. So just briefly, what I wanted to do was cover what AMP for email is. So AMP for email is as it sounds, it stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages. And basically, way back in like 2014, 2015, Google created Accelerated Mobile Pages, which was the very small search results below the search that you put in, that when you clicked on, you went to news sites and things like that. And essentially, they created a framework that allowed you to create really lightweight pages that were perfect for mobile. They then took that in 2018 and created a specific package for email. And that allowed us to use more things than we've ever had available in email. So as well as HTML and CSS, it had a lockdown amount of JavaScript, which meant we could create more interaction and more dynamic content than we could just with HTML and CSS. As well as that, it allowed us to talk to a server. So we can talk to a server and get answers back. So just like a website, you can search for something and get some search results back. And that can all be live and dynamic. So loads of ideas came to people's heads, and people have been building random things ever since. And hopefully we're going to go through some now. But a couple of really basic points is AMP for email is another version of your email. So you have your HTML version that you normally send, you have your plain text version, and then the AMP version is an additional version on top of that. And if you want to send an AMP email, you still have to send a HTML and a text version. So you can't just send an AMP email. Luckily for us, there are some built-in interactive components. There's things like the carousel, the accordion, things like that are already built in that we can reuse over and over again, no problem. And because AMP is a solid framework, it also renders correctly across all of the email clients that do support it. So we'll go through those later, but you can send with confidence that the slider that you send and you've tested in Gmail will work in the other email clients that also support AMP for email. So it takes away some of that pain that us email developers have where we have to check in if every different email client AMP already kind of works there. And yeah, lastly, as I said, because you can update it with live content, it really allows you to think of totally different ways to do things. So as you can see on the right there, a live calculator, calendar slots, even crosswords and Wordle, things like that have all been created with AMP in mind. Cool. So we're going to go on to AMP myths and what you think are myths about AMP, and we're hopefully going to bust some of them or confirm some of them for you. So the first one that I'm going to go through is that it's difficult to register to send AMP emails. So hopefully if you're following along in the chat, you can confirm whether you think this is true or not, and hopefully we can bust some myths.
I get this one all the time.
Yeah,
when I first speak to people, and I understand why, because it's quite daunting as a concept if you're new to it, but actually, yeah, as you'll explain, it's no longer the case.
Yeah, it was. So way back when it first started, you had to send a registration to every single provider. So you had to send a registration to Gmail, you had to send a registration to mail.ru, etc., so that you could sign up to officially register to send them emails. And each one of those took a varying amount of time to get back to you to say whether you were registered. So it was sometimes hard work to wait for all of those to come in. And the time to get registered was also quite a long time sometimes, especially when it first started, it was up to 2 months. Whereas now there's one form, and we'll share the link in the chat to that form, or you can just search for it and you fill it out. You send an email to the email addresses that are on there for the different email clients, and then you get a result back pretty quick. So we've had people sign up and within 2 or 3 weeks, they're registered and ready to go. And yeah, it's just so much easier now to sign up than it ever was before. You just need an example AMP email that will work and then fill out this one registration form and you're done. Cool. Myth 2, over to you.
Right. What would an email webinar be if we weren't mentioning some kind of guidelines around sending? So this is a funny one, because I think this has probably changed over the years just because email as a guideline and sender framework has changed. So the myth is senders need to meet crazy guidelines to be approved. What do we think in the chat? Do we think this is busted and no longer the case, or do we think this is still going?
I've given people time. Let's go.
Yeah, it was busted. Now I mentioned sender guidelines because we're all hopefully familiar with the ones that were launched in February last year by Google, Yahoo, and then updated with Microsoft back in June this year. These are the ones that are actually now aligned with what AMP would require anyway. So if you're not hitting those bulk sender guidelines, you'll be having trouble getting your emails received by recipients anyway. So as long as you're doing that, and we're talking headline, getting SPF, DKIM, DMARC aligned for your sending domain or subdomain, making sure your spam complaints are sub 0.3%, embedding an unsubscribe and one-click unsubscribe, etc. All of those standard guidelines, which you now need to adhere to, if you're already there, then in terms of AMP, you've already met the best practice, which is great. I think on the next slide, we just wanted to use the opportunity as well because although those guidelines have been out, particularly from Google as of, I think, February last year, they were slowly ramping things up in terms of how they filter and punish senders who weren't quite meeting them. So just be aware that as of last month, or the 3rd of November, God, times the year's running away with me, clearly. As of the 3rd of November, they're now ramping that up so that if you aren't meeting all of those guidelines, you're likely to see less filtering in terms of landing spam and more just permanent rejections. Which actually, Jay, I don't know what you think, but for me, that's actually probably more helpful, because pet peeve of mine as a deliverability consultant is people don't often look at bounce reasons enough. And bounce reasons, although they start with a code that looks a little bit daunting, the actual reason beyond that is so explanatory. 9 times out of 10, it'll tell anyone what the problem is and what they need to do, often hyperlinks, right? So when you get a bounce back or a permanent rejection here, you'll know that if your SPF isn't set up properly, it'll call that out and you know what to do. Whereas before, when they were maybe just subtly filtering them into spam, and you didn't have visibility of that, you perhaps weren't aware that something wasn't aligned.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we've been talking to a lot of our clients as well. They obviously, when this first came out, they were worried about things, and then we reassured them that everything has been set up correctly. We've been following good guidelines for a while. It's not really a panic. You don't have to worry about it. And then even when Outlook come out, and they basically came out with this straight away, right? Outlook were like, we're just going to dismiss things if you're not doing it right. Is that? Yeah. So they were like, yeah, straight away. Yeah. So when that came out, they were like, oh, what's going to happen? And again, because everything was set up, it was okay. So I think although the guidelines seem quite daunting, if you're sending already, as James said, in the correct fashion, and you're not just batch and blasting and you haven't got permission and all that kind of stuff, and your authentication isn't set up, then actually if you're hitting those guidelines, then AMP also is going to be a walk in the park. You've already kind of done it. So yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah, it'll be pretty simple.
Yeah, I think if you're using a reputable ESP, I mean, now I don't think you're likely to be able to physically send email without hitting a lot of these. And then the technical piece around things like unsubscribe headers is on them, and they'll have that programmed in. So to Jay's point, it sounds daunting, but most of you should be there anyway. There's a good opportunity to just shout that out. Yeah, I mean, Netcore's definitely set up. But a couple of shout out things I will do on this, just in case anyone's not using them. Slightly away from AMP briefly, but make sure you're using things like Google Postmaster tools to make sure you've got visibility on Google's perception of your brand and spam complaints. Likewise, Microsoft have something called Microsoft SNDS, which is more IP based. It's applicable only if you send using a dedicated IP, but again, it will give you an idea of their perception of your sending. And Yahoo introduced a Sender Hub a while back that was predominantly just for kind of a feedback loop, but more recently within that Sender Hub, you now are starting to see signs of what they feel your reputation might be around the engagement that they see. So definitely look, and we can perhaps get these links out to everybody. But yeah, Google Postmaster and the Yahoo Sender Hub for everyone, the free tools. And then if you send using a dedicated IP, Microsoft SNDS, and we'll get those links shared out to you as well.
Yeah, awesome. Also, if you do try and register with AMP and you are unsuccessful, they tell you why. So it's not like you send it, never receive a reply, and never get told what's the problem is, and then you just don't hear back. They will send a reply, and often there's some information in there that will help you out. And most of the time we find that when people try to register and have failed, it's often because when they've sent that test email, it is either gone to the wrong email address or it's been formatted incorrectly. So the AMP for email part of it itself is not formatted correctly, and that's why you've failed. It's often nothing to do with your sender guidelines. So hopefully, if you use a tool like Netcore where you can drag and drop the elements in, or any of the other tools that are available to do that, you'll already have code that meets the guidelines, and then it's all good. Cool. So the next one is most email service providers don't support sending AMP. Originally, this was quite a hard one. So think about that. If you've tried to set it up before with your email service provider and you've had a bad experience and things like that, then hopefully that's now busted. So pretty much all enterprise solutions, Netcore, Braze, Salesforce, many email service providers that we now talk to, they all have AMP built in. A lot of the senders behind email service providers, they like Mailjet and things like that, they also have built-in AMP or Mailgun, whatever it is. They have built-in AMP sending abilities now as well. So even if your ESP is using one of those third-party senders, they can probably set up AMP pretty quick. So there shouldn't be a problem with that. But what I would say is, if you choose a send, if you have a send tool that you currently use, so say you're in Salesforce, in that environment, it's not set up great to send AMP. Essentially, you just get a box to paste in your AMP code, and that's the end of it. There's no other support. There's no other drag and drop capabilities or things like that. Whereas other senders such as Netcore Cloud or Mailmodo and things like that, there's a few out there that are built specifically for AMP and have built proper features for AMP. So if you really think you are looking to send AMP, it's probably worth checking out one of the ESPs like Netcore Cloud, which specifically is set up for AMP. So you get all of the drag and drop. They know what's happening with AMP. Whereas, Braze and Salesforce, they just give you a box to paste in your code, and that's the end of the support. So just think about that when you're like trying to set up campaigns. Or if you're thinking about migrating and you want to use AMP, make sure you ask that question as well.
On to myth 4. So my audience wouldn't see an AMP email. So this is something that I think it's really stems from the fact that initially, in terms of mail client adoption, it rolled out slowly. But I think we've got this one as busted-ish for a couple of reasons. Reason number one being that we have seen over the years that the mail client adoption has increased. You can see here the main ones that we would probably be familiar with as a group of senders on this audience, Gmail being often within the UK clients that I work with Netcore, is a core majority, 50% plus of their sending audience. And then you've got Yahoo, AOL, Mail.ru, Fair Email is probably the top level ones. And then if you look at what that represents from a mail client level, you're probably hitting around, about 25% of email client market share. So on one hand, we could say, well, that's still a smaller amount than 100%, but it's grown. But the other reason why this is busted-ish is because we have to sit back and think, okay, what are we talking about when we talk about AMP? In terms of the end product, we're talking about an interactive email. And if we then come away from AMP and think about interactive email as a whole, now with certain ESPs and certain providers, and we do this at Netcore, so I guess a quick plug, but we actually can code with CSS and enable our clients to deliver an interactive email experience into Apple Mail client as well. So if you factor that in, then we're actually talking about interactive emails, capturing that Apple market share, which supercharges that 25% to 75%. And as you alluded to, Jay, before, is that every AMP email, regardless, is sent with an HTML fallback. So even if people aren't going to be able to receive it because they're using an email client that might not accept it for now, they're still going to receive your email with the original messaging on. They're just going to be redirected to have that experience more on site versus with an email. But it's growing, and actually we're seeing some really cool results with clients who are adopting it, particularly since we found that way to leverage CSS and get it into Apple Mail clients. It's a bit of I don't want to use the word game changer because that's thrown away around so much, but quite a differentiator at the moment.
Yeah, and so this email client market share is actually taken from emailclientmarketshare.com, which is what Litmus put out, and they base that on their open tracking pixel. So sometimes we caveat this with, normally it's heavily US based users of Litmus, so they generally have a higher Apple market share, because in the US Apple is a bit higher adoption, and you should always look at the stats for your own audience. So as James said, like 50% of most UK senders probably have Gmail. We've worked with some in like Europe that have up to 80% of their email clients when they open it is on Gmail. So if you can get that report from your ESP to say where are people opening your emails and they do have Gmail, then that's a really good argument to kind of do that. And then, yeah, exactly as James said, with obviously the majority of the things I do is interactive email. And the way that we use it is we use progressive enhancement to add interactivity as you go. So Gmail, we use AMP, but then Outlook.com, we can do some interactivity. It can't be as flashy as maybe what AMP's doing, but we can do some. And then we progressively enhance it a bit more for Thunderbird, Apple Mail, things like that. So actually, really, the only email client that you can't do anything with is the good old Outlook Windows Desktop, which everyone knows is we can't do anything with that. But most senders, unless they're B2B, that's generally quite a small portion of their audience. So by combining AMP and, as James said, HTML and CSS interactivity, you really could be hitting like 80-90% of your audience with an interactive email. So it could really be worth investing in.
And I think, Jay, on that, just on that point, one thing that I've seen, like with anything, there's always the early adopters and the slower adopters. I think that last piece, people who are embracing that opportunity, I think, to hit Apple Mail and other clients with interactive email, are starting to see quite a shift because they realise that not everyone has embraced that yet. So it's something to think about. And to your point, Jay, if you're analysing your audience first and you realise that represents a significant portion of your audience, it might be something to think about.
Definitely. Also, the AMP working group is open for any email clients that would like new email clients to join. So Fair Email kind of joined in the last kind of 12 months. Other email clients are talking to them. So hopefully more email clients will support it in the future, because there's lots out there now. It's not just Gmails and Apples. There are loads more. Cool. This one, I get this one loads. I don't know about you. But yeah, Google are going to kill this. Google will discontinue AMP and the work will all be lost and it's not worth it. So hopefully this one again is busted-ish, because obviously we don't know what Google will do. But what I would say is the AMP for Email project is an open source project, which is on the OpenJS Foundation. It allows people to contribute. The main styles and JavaScript for AMP is hosted on Google servers, so they have kind of control, but that code is available for people to use. So if Google did decide that they were going to use it, they were going to get rid of it, there is a chance that someone else could host it and put it somewhere, and then AMP could live on. It's not just going to die if Google say no. And then secondly, they also integrate AMP with loads of their products, and it's a big selling point. And lots of other big products do as well. So if you've ever got an email that someone's left a comment in a Google Doc, you can reply directly in the email itself. That's all live. That's all done with AMP. Asana do the same. You can comment for things that someone's put on a task for you. And I've seen it in lots of different SaaS products where they've kind of built in this AMP interaction for you. So hopefully, because it's such a big use and it's open source, we don't think it's going to go anywhere. But we can't. I guess you can't ever say 100% that Google won't do something. But like I said, if Google did, someone else should host it, and it wouldn't be a problem.
100%. And then myth 6, I think this was probably one of the early day myths.
I think so, yeah.
Don't as much anymore, but AMP emails can go into legally questionable places. We all love a legal question. So we have this as busted because I think, again, probably alluding to the early days of AMP, there was concern that the fact that some emails would have dynamic elements that would change content-wise, expire after a certain amount of time, perhaps deem one price and then another, depending on the time period. But as we've alluded to before, there's always an HTML version sent with an AMP email anyway that ultimately will have the correct info and be the fallback after a period of time if needs be. So this was busted pretty early on, but I think Jay and I were chatting the other day and we wanted to make sure that any kind of typical AMP myths that we've seen out there, we wanted to kind of raise back up, because in the crazy world of tech that we all live in now, it's quite easy to see and be overwhelmed at how fast tech's moving. So it's nice to maybe resurface some of the myths that we might have seen busted a while ago and rebust them. But hopefully this causes that heart rate to go back down again. There's nothing to worry about.
Yeah, and so one of the things I thought of as well when we were chatting just yesterday, James, we said that obviously websites have this same kind of problem where obviously you can update a website tomorrow and it will say something completely different to what it says today. So in court cases and things like that, people have screenshotted, people have saved websites. That's all possible with AMP as well. So if there was ever something that was incorrect or legally questionable, I guess, and someone wanted to raise it, they could probably save a version of it or copy and paste it and things like that. So it's not like it's disappeared forever. And yeah, it's in line with the web, so it should be fine. Cool. AMP is expensive is one of the ones that we've kind of heard before. But
yes.
Yeah, I would say that it's busted-ish. So it's not, it is an expense, but it's not an expense that's crazy compared to other marketing expenses. So if you were to think about setting up if you didn't have an Instagram channel and you were going to set up an Instagram channel, that's something new that you've got to take on. You've got to set up the infrastructure, you've got to get tools, you've got to talk to companies, you've got to figure out who can do it, that kind of thing. I would say that AMP is similar to that, except we know that AMP has a good return on investment because we use it in email, and we know AMP email has a good return on investment because you haven't got to do paid ads, you haven't got to do paid positioning, premium listings, anything like that. So even though, yes, to get it first started, maybe your ESP has a cost to kind of add the opportunity to send AMP. Maybe you need to use a tool builder, or if you've got an email design system and you've got it in a tool like Alpaco, you've then got to then set up your AMP version in Alpaco so that you've got a drag and drop editor where you can do the emails, or any other tools like that that are all related to AMP email. There might be a cost to begin with, but actually once it's kind of set up, it runs the same as your email tool already, and the return on investment is quite high for those for emails like AMP. And if you add the interactivity, like we've mentioned already, you're kind of hitting two birds with one stone by having the HTML and CSS interactivity and then adding the AMP as well.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, Jay, just like as a quick plug for us at the Netcore, there's no kind of upfront charge from our side. We come as a set. You get deliverability consultant and a CSM, whether you like it or not, but hopefully you will. Then we can help kind of get that set up with you and talk you through it as well. So we may not be the only ones, but in terms of any upfront cost, it's not there with ourselves.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so I just put this table in just to kind of combine everything we said before. So we said expensive, but by including AMP and interactive HTML, you really hit lots of different email clients, and it allows you to do loads more. CSS hover effects, interactive elements, animations and transitions, things like that are all kind of possible with all these email clients by combining HTML, CSS, and then an AMP version as well. And if you've got a drag and drop editor, or you've got a pre-set up email design system in like an external drag and drop editor like Alpaco or something like that, then you kind of get all that upfront work done, and then once you've building those emails, it's already there, so you haven't got to pay anyone extra to do any more code or anything. It's just all set up, and because Netcore has a load of stuff built in, you can drag and drop loads of cool stuff in without having to involve a developer anyway. And I wanted to bring up, so I mentioned Babylon right at the beginning. So this was the email we did, which was like an interactive health assessment, nutrition assessment. So we worked with them to create this kind of experience within the email. It was HTML and CSS and AMP. And then we also had fallbacks that went back to that kind of static. So we took the opportunity to really showcase what was possible within email and do AMP and HTML and CSS. But the real thing that came through was you got a 56% higher click-through rate on the interactive versus the standard. So just by having interactive elements, you got over 50% higher click-through, and then an increase in conversions. So when used correctly, you can definitely do great stuff with interactive, and it will help with your KPIs and things like that.
That's awesome.
Cool.
I love that. I just love the story. The first one you sent back in 2019. Sorry. Myth 8. So creating AMP emails needs a dedicated specialist developer. So this always comes up and was initially quite a concern. And I think that for the marketers and CRM people in the room, we've kind of half busted this because it depends on which ESP you're working with. But I can completely get it that if back when this first came out, it was often tapping a developer on the shoulder, asking them to help with code and get this in. And like all of us, developers, marketers, we're all time poor. To-do lists coming as long as our arm. But if you're now using and working with an ESP, Netcore and others are available, where we actually have a drag and drop or WYSIWYG editor where you can actually use components and drag and drop them in. Whether that's a spin the wheel component, whether it's a NPS survey component, scratch card, etc., etc. And then obviously, like any component with a WYSIWYG, you can then fully brand it, whether it's fancy fonts you use on brand and font colors. It's just a lot more easier for marketers to design and bring into their campaigns and journeys. So I think from that component, if you're working with an ESP that has that, it's completely busted. If you're still working in an environment where perhaps you are needing to paste code into a block, then you're kind of half busted. I like to lean on the former because we provide it, but I'm biased, of course.
No, I agree. I think as well, a lot of the things that were sold in that were crazy for AMP were like when they first showed it off on the keynote from when Google did it, they spoke with companies like Booking.com and Airbnb and things like that. And the complicated setups they had were like search for a hotel, find locations, things like that. And all of those complicated elements may have needed a developer. But in terms of the emails that we kind of, most of us send day to day, or the interactive elements, like James said, like an NPS survey, a spinning wheel, a scratch to reveal, things like that, because those are simpler, they are easy to kind of do drag and drop stuff with. And like, there's loads of companies out there like Netcore that have all these components pre-built for you. So you don't need a developer to do that. I think the other reason it was kind of half busted was because if you do want to do things that are not in a drag and drop editor, you may well need to ask a developer to help out, or maybe even there's some things within a drag and drop editor where you can need to connect to like your website or your database or something like that, in which case you might have to reach out to a developer to say, can I have a link to our API endpoint or something like that. So it might not remove developers completely, but hopefully it would move a lot of things out of the way. And then also tools have evolved so much since AMP first came out. So first, when AMP first came out, there was no drag and drop editors, no template editors or external CMS tools like Taxi for Email, things like that. None of those were set up to use AMP. So even if you wanted to, you couldn't create the modules you already had in HTML in AMP. But now that more tools are coming onto this, so I know Alpaca recently launched the ability to have AMP modules specifically, and loads of other tools like Netcore Cloud have already got it and stuff like that. So there's lots of places now where you can actually create AMP code or create your own customized AMP emails. So I don't think it's a big problem anymore. Cool. So we're going to go through some live emails, and these were all demo ones and all drag and drop things that Netcore have set up. So you can scan the QR code and we'll share the link as well, but you can basically go to this and send yourself the links and have a look. But also I'm going to show you a couple live. We've been talking a lot, so we haven't got loads of time. So I'm not going to run through all 6, but I think we'll just run through a couple. And the first one is this scratch card element. So scratch to reveal a protein in a can. I think when I was reading it, I think Netcore completely made this product up, so it's not even a real thing. But yeah, so this nice kind of scratch to reveal. It also has a HTML and CSS version that works as well, so it's not just AMP. But scratch to reveal is something that we've done with HTML and CSS a lot before, and other tools like Movable Link have this kind of scratch to reveal functionality, but it actually works as a web page. So you actually have to click on it to go to a web page to then do the scratch to reveal. And AMP really just allows you to remove those clicks. So you don't have to go anywhere. It's already in the email. And I think that's a really big winner for AMP. And we all know the less clicks, the more likely it is someone's going to take an action. So if we can do that with the scratch to reveal, then that's good. Yeah, we've used this for like discount codes before. Or if you send a welcome email and people get a discount code, we find you get higher engagement if they've got it's always that weird, what's it called? Like when you put time into doing something, you feel like you need to do more for it, like the old time sunk thing. So if you've expended effort to reveal the discount code, people feel more inclined to use the discount code. So that's kind of a good incentive to think about emails like this.
I think it's nice on a phone as well, where you can. We're on touchscreen, right? So it's quite nice to digitally touch and start revealing codes rather than just the bog standard welcome 10 from every e-commerce company. You can make it more bespoke. You can place your RFM VIPs and give them the specific code.
Yep. So yeah, and this one is like a slightly simpler version where you can click to reveal. So you don't have to scratch to reveal, you can click to reveal. I think this one as well, because when you click on it, it can reveal, that can be personalized. So you could really add a lot of dynamic content to this. So this is obviously a 20% off one, but if you've got segments where maybe you want to give people more percentage off, less percentage off, because it's live as well, you can change it through. So maybe you give a 50% off and then the next day you change it to 20% off and you haven't got to send another email to do that. It's not preset. That's kind of already set up. We'll just do one more and then we'll go back to the presentation because I like this one's really cool. So it's actually an accordion. But the way it's styled, you can get a little bit more information about a product. And I think email really struggles with this, especially if you work in a not e-commerce and you send emails that have a lot of content. On a website, you would probably hide some of that content. So some of those frequently asked questions, or maybe there's legal terms and conditions or product descriptions that you're not really needed, but some people might want to find out more. Having the ability to have an accordion and click on things and kind of get a bit more information, I think is a really nice way to add to your email. And you're not making it really long on mobile as well, because these all stack on top of each other. If they all had a product description under them as well and a shop now button, that's automatically going to make a massive long email that you've got to scroll through. Whereas if you just click on it to get this and it hovers on top of the other one, it doesn't make the emails really long. Yeah, so I like those. So so there's
really
six that you can play with. So yeah, I'll flick through the next ones. So carousel, live carousel, you can see. This one is a quiz, so you can go through and answer some quiz questions, and it'll give you an answer at the end. So that's a really nice interactive way that you can get people to look at products, or even just adding a quiz element to your email to kind of ask just a random question as well, like anything is a nice way to get engagement. And then this one is the one that loads of people want, which is that spin the wheel. So you can start to spin, and then it loads and loads like that, and then you click it and it will tell you what you've won. So that's a really nice interaction as well, with obviously loads of options of what you could do.
Yeah, everyone loves a wheel spin.
Cool. So we'll quickly run through these common pitfalls and easy wins, because I know we've only got 5 minutes left and we wanted to give some chance for questions. So this, I think this was me, James. So make every email AMP is a common mistake that we see. So you get the ability to send AMP emails, and then all of a sudden you want to send every email as AMP. But the beauty of it is that with interactivity, you really surprise and delight people. So having big campaigns, inform and educate people, solve a recipient's problem is a really good way of using AMP. So don't send it every single time. Just use it kind of when you think it's best. And we kind of have this thing at Action Rocket where we say 80% of your emails should be that business as usual, templated, simple emails. And if you've got a good workflow set up for those, they can get out the door pretty quick. And then that'll give you time to focus on these AMP emails where you can create a bit more of an interactive, maybe a bit more educational email that will definitely get higher results because you've allowed yourself some time to play with it a bit more.
And then for mistake number 2, interactivity will solve my problems. I think we all know the answer to this, but I'm going to reiterate it. If you are having email problems in terms of conversions, deliverability, AMP for email or interactive emails isn't going to necessarily change that, because the foundation that your email program needs to be built on are things around knowing your audience, segmenting and personalizing so that you are articulating the value of whatever you're selling or offering to different personas within that audience, or perhaps you're leveraging things like RFM analysis and driving content to VIPs to make them feel special and thanked. If you're doing that and essentially driving relevant content and value, then this is a way to kind of supercharge that. But if your program already is kind of main batch and blast and it's not delivering, then this is the equivalent of almost putting a supercar engine in a car with no wheels. It's not going to go anywhere despite how fast the engine could take it. We need that solid foundation. But assuming that everyone on this call has got the appetite to already have that solid foundation with driving good deliverability practices and getting results, I think this is a really cool way to really supercharge some of that. And I think, Jay, your last point was really pertinent, the fact that there is that temptation to just say, okay, yeah, let's just do all the emails. And then people become a bit numb to it. I love that 80-20 split, because then you get the opportunity to really think about where you can surprise and delight rather than just having it as a checklist on a to-do list when you're creating email content. So yeah, use it wisely, but make sure you've got a good foundation to build on.
Yep. I feel like I should explain the image because I created this slide for James, and I did it. The reason for the image is because I always say, I do lots of talks about interactivity, and I always say that if you had a cake and the cake was made of poo and you put icing on it, then the icing is not going to make the cake any better. And I feel like that's what we're basically saying. So if none of those other bits are there, but you put the icing on, it's not going to work. So that's the reason for the slightly odd image. I feel like next time I might go with the supercar analogy that James had. That's probably a nicer analogy than mine.
I don't know where that came from, because you've even got icing on the cake on the slide. I have a habit of bringing some really bad analogies in, but yeah, hopefully it drove us to the same message.
Cool. And then a common pain point for one of the wins that we really wanted to share was that you can use AMP email to hit a common pain point in your lifecycle campaign. So we've kind of mentioned it as if it was like a cool, fun, interactive thing that's just a random thing that you should be doing. But if you really think about where someone in your lifecycle campaign is kind of hitting a bump and you're not getting the response that you thought you would get, then this is a good reason to think about using AMP. So NPS scores is a really good one, or feedback scores. Often we send a feedback email for after someone's bought every single product, but the click-through rate or the amount of reviews you get are sub kind of 10%. Whereas if you've got a form directly in the email, or you've just got to rate it kind of 1 to 10 like an NPS score, or 1 to 5, and you just do one click and it's done, then that removes so many barriers and so many clicks that you can really up that part of your lifecycle campaign. So think about a pain point, think about a use case that you could reduce the clicks, get it all done in email nice and easily. And yeah, hopefully that will improve it. Previous things I've worked on are sign a contract in an email. So, like DocuSign, you can sign that in an email. I worked with an airline where you could pick your airplane seat from an email. So you haven't got to go through the whole process of like going to the website, finding the like logging in and all that stuff. That was all possible with an email, or with AMP updating live. So yeah, so those kind of things where it's a real barrier to getting people to do things, AMP is a really great way to kind of do that.
I think for me, I quite like to simplify stuff and probably oversimplify it, but particularly B2C, right? I always say to anyone when you're sending email, we are all consumers. So like that airline example completely resonated with me, because we've all been in that pain of like having to then go on the app and it might come up with a cookie message on your phone that takes up half the airline seat, when you go to the site. So I think
Exactly.
if you're thinking of ideas, just think, well, how would I react? Would I like this? It's always a good start. But yeah, sorry, it's I love that example.
The way forward, yeah.
And then the second win is incorporate a simple element to the regular send you've already got. So I guess the obvious one here is you might have periodic quarterly sales events. We're in the midst of Black Friday now. The holiday season's around the corner, and then it'll be Valentine's Day and so forth. So an interesting way you can test that is, rather than trying to create a brand new email from scratch, a brand new concept, you might be able to bring an interactive element into perhaps a discount code, spinning oil, or one of those simple drag and drop features you might bring in, and see how that performs. Like with anything, you want to A/B test the actual send as well. I think I saw a question about how you can see if a certain AMP component might resonate more than others, and one way to doing that is A/B testing. But you've also likely got previous results from previous holiday season sends as well. So you compare next year's Valentine's Day send with the previous one, and if you see a significant uplift based on the portion that are receiving the AMP email and actioning that, then it gives you some really nice data points. And then top tip to add that interactive only link into your code, so you can track how well it goes, which I think we've got in the QR code linked at the bottom right.
Yeah, so the bottom right is the HTML CSS code if you want to do a simple interactive tip to reveal. But yeah, I mean the top, like if you've got a link that is in your AMP email only and people click on it, you know that people are getting the AMP and they're clicking on it and they're interacting with it, so it's good. And similarly for HTML and CSS, if you click on something and something reveals, having the link on that reveal means that the only way people can see it is if they click on it. So someone has interacted with your email. So without worrying about server requests and tracking pixels and all that kind of stuff, just a simple link of only available to interactive people, and they click on it, that it's had interaction. And then James, one of the questions you had there was like, how do we check these kind of features? Sorry, is it James in the chat, not James Deacon, sorry. James in the chat was like, how do we tell if people like the elements? And I think this is a good way to do it. So there's kind of engagement on clicks, then also read time or engagement time, you can often get that tracked. And then also, like you said as well on the chat, if you have loads of unsubscribes after you send an AMP email, maybe people are not happy with what you did. but overall, we've not really seen that kind of response from an interactive email. To be honest, we've seen more of a response of people being intrigued and engaged with an interactive email rather than the opposite of being annoyed by an interactive email. So, and often for us, we actually have to give pointers for people to say, this is an interactive email, click on stuff, because people don't realize that emails are interactive. So yeah, it's a good one there.
And if you're using Gmail, it sounds like a really simple point, but maybe not everyone knows it. You'll see if an email is interactive or dynamic, so to speak, because there'll be a little lightning bolt as you open the email, not far on the right-hand side next to the subject line. Gmail enable interactive email ability by default, unless you go into settings and turn it off. So you may well have some living in your inbox already. It's a nice exercise just to quickly go through if you're commuting home on the train and to actually these brands are using it. Yeah, I've already seen them. So I think we're handing back to Anoop, I think, for any Q&A. While we're waiting, please put any questions in the Q&A. Jay and I will do our best to try and help.
Yeah, that was very insightful. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, James. We do have a lot of questions. So we'll probably start off with a question from an anonymous attendee. It says, is there any way to bulk submit the sender registration form? Does Gmail offer exclusive support for this, or can it be done through an API?
No, is the answer. There's no way to bulk submit. You have to go through the whole send registration form process. So you'd have to, you have to physically open the form. And also as part of that, you do have to send an email to each of the email clients. So you have to send a test email. They give you an email address for Gmail, Yahoo, Mail, Fair Email, so that they can all approve it. So there's no way or API to do that, unfortunately.
Right. Another one. Does getting an approval from Google for sending AMP email offer any advantage for deliverability and the sender reputation?
I can probably take this one, Jay. It's one of those ones that as a byproduct of well, first of all, you're going to be hitting the sender guidelines we spoke about to be able to use AMP to a certain degree. So you're going to be focusing on things like reducing your spam complaint, making sure that's in tow, making sure you're fully authenticated. You're probably then a brand that's focused on driving engagement and conversion. So as a byproduct, you might find that because we see it starts to condition even more thought about end engagement. It also helps, like we said, if you're building on a strong foundation, you then see increased opens, clicks, like Jay you saw with Babylon. So as a byproduct, you then get better sender reputation because you're showing Google, Microsoft better deliverability signals in terms of engagement. But on its own in isolation, it's not a trick to get in the inbox. They won't say, "Oh, you're registered for AMP, you're in." It's more like anything. It's by following the best practice and getting the benefits of using it as a byproduct. You'll probably find that the engagement helps you drive a solid reputation.
Right. Another question, how do you test AMP emails from both rendering and performance standpoint?
Yeah, so from Netcore, you can send yourself a test. So if you've got a email in Netcore, you can literally make it, send yourself a test, open it on your devices. It's the same way we test all of our own emails as well. There are tools like Email on Acid, Litmus, etc., Inbox Monster, things like that, where you can send tests. All of those don't actually support AMP, so you're going to have to send to a live device to get them. But like I mentioned before, one of the benefits of those AMP components are they are tested across all of those email clients that have said they will send it. So if you send a carousel to Gmail, it will work in Gmail and Yahoo and Fair Email and mail.ru because they all support the component. So you kind of get a little bit of peace of mind, slightly different to the HTML and CSS world where all the email clients have different standards and you don't know what all of them do. So you get a little bit of that. But yeah, for rendering, I would just set up each of those email clients. They're all free. Set them up on your phone, set them up on your computer. Just send yourself a test. We at Action Rocket, we have a seed list where we send it to one email address and all the inboxes get it at once. And then we can have a look through. I mean, we do loads of email testing, so we've kind of set that up. But yeah, in terms of performance, just exactly the same as you do all your other emails. So if you've got a UTM parameter that you add a specific AMP one so that you know that it's an AMP click rather than something else. And then opens, all that stuff will all be recorded exactly the same as all of your over emails. So you can kind of do it exactly the same as what you did before.
Thanks, Jay. I think last two questions. One from James. Is there, okay, with the follow-up question on that, are there any code size limitations, Jay? One from Kranti.
There is, but so we know about Gmail for HTML CSS has around about 100 kilobytes. AMP emails in Gmail actually have a 200 kilobytes, so they have even more code available to them. So yeah, if you're sending AMP emails, you get a little bit more code for your bang for your buck kind of thing for AMP.
Understood. Thank you. Again, question back from James. Is there a metric for favorability of these features? Like, do recipients actually like any of these elements? For example, I like carousel, but hate the price wheel. Do any of these features have potential to turn off users if they look like Pexi pop-ups, perhaps tracking unsubscribe when the features are deployed?
I mean, that's where my head would go, I guess, is you're tracking, to your point earlier, Jay, you're tracking the performance from an unsubscribe point of view, even from an engagement point of view, particularly when you are looking at that user level. If you're seeing that someone in particular has dropped off throughout a period of time and then they've picked back up, different tests you can do, but it's probably more about making sure with any testing and tracking that you're, I'm a bit boring when I say this, but documenting it to a point where you understand where trends are forming, right? With it, depending on the ESP, they may have a webhook that can push data to you as well, so you can ingest that, so you can clearly identify through the webhook whether that email was sent as an AMP email to an audience and opened as an AMP email or not, what that performance was over time compared to spinning the wheel. I did work with a brand once, and I'm not saying everyone can do this, but they actually, on a lot of their emails, had at the bottom, score this email 1 to 5. Yep. I love the idea, and I appreciate it's a bit like when you go to I know a lot of supermarkets have it with the different coloured faces, smiley faces you can just tap. You'd be surprised at how many people actually press the button. Obviously, it's not everyone, but it's not quite as few as you might think, and it gives you some kind of indication as well. So there are different things you can play with, but those core, like unsubscribes or maybe even performance, you track. I was going to say spam complaints, but from a Gmail point of view, we won't know where they came from. You might just at a high level say, well, a collective audience seemed to turn off more on email 1 versus 2, but you won't know that I marked that spam personally. So James, I think your thinking around the unsubs is in the right place. You could just probably pair that with some click data as well, I would say.
Another thing I would add as well is if you're a SaaS company or you're a company that you can talk to your clients, then I would just ask them outright. Like you, if you're having like user experience testing, or you talk to people in a shop and you've sent them AMP emails, things like that, you can literally just say, oh, did you see that email where we included the spin to win or the tap to reveal? And if they go, oh yeah, I hated it, it was horrible, then you're getting first-hand feedback. So that's always nice if you can do it. Or yeah, we have a weekly newsletter, Email Weekly at Action Rocket, and people actively reply to us and say this was horrible, we don't like it. Normally it's because I deliberately put a Rickroll after a link on purpose, but sometimes a lot of people do like that, but we do get feedback either way, whether it's good or bad. So having that, I think it was one of the bulk signed guidelines, right? You shouldn't have a no reply anymore. So hopefully people will reply to you and say, yeah, I like this email, I don't like this email, etc. So, and you can encourage those replies as well. That will be engagement, that will help your deliverability as well. So at the bottom, 100%. Say, reply to us and let us know what you think about this email as well.
And that's a good shout on the SaaS companies, but even, if you've got a core, depending on how you define it, or your ESP defines it, if you're using ERFM, but if you do have a VIP, you might have an audience within that VIP segment that actually you create a mini focus group or a small Amazon voucher or a discount for a bit of feedback. And actually, like anything, whether you're serving customers in consumer land or business land, direct feedback is more powerful than anything. So actually, that's a really good point, Jay. Thank you.
Jay and James, I have two more questions, probably shorter ones. Are AMP forms safe to use for submitting requests? Could there be any risks involved?
They're all over HTTPS, so it should be safe. I would say that if you are asking the question, should we send this information for an email? I would just not send it for an email. So things like it's not possible to kind of like put your credit card details in and buy something directly in an email. And I don't think anyone should be advocating for that because there's safer environments on the web. So if you build a form and you say, is this safe enough for what's going through this form? Then automatically I would say it's not safe enough and don't do it. That's probably that's what I do.
Right. And the last question, 3 best performing AMP ideas in both pre and post purchase journeys.
Ooh.
Good question.
Yeah. Pre-buying journeys would be highlighting features. So having the ability to have a carousel or even building an interactive experience. So that was kind of what the Babylon one was. So they had a pre-health check that happened in January because obviously new year, new you, everyone gets on the health check bandwagon. So that AMP email was like, how's your liver? How's your brain? Things like that. So you kind of, and it mimicked what was in the app. So by doing that, you kind of pre-sold the product before they'd even gone through to buy it. So if you can do that, then that's a really good pre-purchase email that I would do with AMP.
I think on that as well, where the poll works. So,
yeah.
So you can also treat it like a poll, right? So you can also, I worked with a very large e-commerce brand that did this and then would ingest that data back, and that would also help inform the journey that person went on. So if you're presenting, shoes, cardigans, etc., then that would inform the content moving forward, which also helps on a different note because you're then channeling someone down to what they're likely to potentially be interested in. Post-purchase.
What reviews?
I would say.
Yeah, there's loads.
I like reviews and loyalty. I think are nice. I've seen them, but also, again, I think some of this, like anything in email marketing, it does depend at a certain point on your audience. But what I do see is we spoke about feedback earlier. I see emails simply asking how someone's experience was, both with the product they just received, but also maybe just the purchase experience, everything, and building that trust with the brand of like, we care about how you feel. They perform really well. They're a bit boring from the outside, but actually they perform well, and people at a subconscious level like to be asked about whether the service they paid for was good enough. So actually, although it's not a sexy kind of post-purchase, as you say, to drive more, it does help build brand affinity and trust, I've seen.
Yeah, one of the use cases that I found a lot of value in and a lot of brands trust is taking the feedback from the users who have not come back to them after the purchase. So for a dormant set of users, if you're able to kind of send email after 90 days, if they've not interacted with your emails post-purchase, I think that's where they would actually get a lot of feedback to say, hey, the purchase was not good, but maybe they didn't need the brand to kind of use the product. So there are multiple use cases that we could think of, but I think that's one of the favorite, one of my favorite post-purchase AMP email.
Cool. Shall I move the slide?
I think we're about time. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. Feel free to connect with us, and we'll try to answer the rest of the questions over an email, and we'll reach out to you. But if you have any questions, please do reach out. Both the teams, Netcore and Action Rocket, are here to help. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, James, for this wonderful webinar.
No, thank you. It was great, Jane.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Anoop.
See you in the next one.
Appreciate everyone's time.